Okay, so this time around we're going to learn how to legally acquire media for your newly set up media server. And one of the ways in which you can do this is through the app called Sonarr, for which we can see the website here. Sonarr is a server written in C# that allows you to search for TV series using the TVDB and grab the information for those and send it over to your download client, which then does the dirty work. Once that's done, it grabs the files and places them where you told it to, which is usually in a folder accessible by your media server, so you can actually watch the stuff. Now, there are multiple forks of Sonarr, which cover other things. So there's one called Radarr, which is for films. There's one called Lidarr, which is for music. There's one called Bazaar, which is for subtitles. Or there's also headphones for music. There's loads of these, but today I will actually show you how to set up Radarr instead of Sonarr because it's for films and it will allow us to download some royalty-free films, because that's the only thing you'll ever be doing with these, right? Of course, why would you want to be downloading anything else? So over here we see the platforms that this is available on, which is to say all of them. The way you would install it on Linux is very easy, effectively speaking, because you're just setting up, if you're on Debian or Ubuntu, you would set up the repository and then you would just install it as any other package. And because it's a self-contained server database, everything, there's no configuration to do there. It just launches the interface. But because we like stuff to be modular, we're going to do it with Docker. Now, one thing to pay attention is that there's still available version 2 and version 3. Version 3 is the new one that's been rewritten. It's currently in beta. And to get it, you usually have to go to the nightly build. We want this version because it's a lot better. And it's the one that will be the only one available in the future. So that's the one we want to do. For both Radarr and Sonarr, there are two places you can usually get a Docker image. A Linux server, a good old friends that seem to have Docker images for just about everything, or Hoshio, which is somebody who's made their own images. I've actually been using the second one. So what you would do is go to one of these two, whichever you prefer, and grab the details off of it. Let's say the Docker Composer and create your file and so on. So I have, effectively speaking, taken this file here, but put in the details of Hoshio because I prefer this version. We can see that over here in the same folders I have set up last time. I have one called Radarr. So here's our Docker Compose. Now what we see in here is, just as usual, a service called Radarr, an image, which is the one we just looked at, the environment variables, which are important to set because they have to be the same as the user who is running this. Otherwise, your media might not be accessible. That's usually 1000 or 1001 and so on. You just ID your username and get that. Your time zone can be helpful. And then two important folders. The first is the config. You can actually also use a named volume if you like for this one. I like to just keep it in the same directory. That's why it's /. And data. Data is actually quite important the way it's structured. I will show you in a moment. That's because of the interplay between Sonarr and Radarr who download the stuff or send the stuff to the download client, and the download client that needs to have it accessible, and then your media server. So when you usually get these, it suggests you to have a path to a TV series or whatever, and then the path to the download client. This is actually a terrible idea. I don't know why they have it in this, but because these are Docker bound volumes, it actually sees these as two different file systems completely. So what happens when the download is done and the download client says that it's done, it will actually copy the file over to this folder, and then it will delete it off of this one. Instead, if they are in the same file system, it will just create a hard link, which means that it's accessible from both folders, but the files are not actually copied over, and it saves the whole operation. So what I've done here is created a local data directory that is one directory up from the Sonarr one, so it's accessible from all of the other ones. It's using the default port for Radarr 7878, and I've also created two networks. One is for a system called Jackett. This is a thing that interfaces with Torrent trackers. And the second one is for transmission, which is a Torrent client. This is so it's able to connect to both. So we'll now go and have a look at the system. So we have Jackett and transmission here. What we want to do is make the directory called data, which I've just set up there. And inside data, the way I want to set up is, I think for your TV shows, I think for your films, your music, and then one for the downloads. Because I'm only setting up Radarr here, which is for films, I'm just gonna create a folder called films.
So sorry, just can
Yeah,
I just
go ahead.
clarify? So Radarr is just for movies, and Sonarr is just for TV.
Exactly.
Okay, right. I just was confused by that, but yeah, thanks.
Radarr is a fork of Sonarr.
Yes, yes, I saw that, but I just thought it was weird that it was a fork and then it was
Yeah,
only
I
for
actually
movies. But
understood why they don't just merge the projects since they're so similar, but
yeah,
that's just the way it is.
it's just the way it is. Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Now that we have our data, downloads and films, the idea is that transmission has access to downloads, and so does Radarr, and they both also have access to films. So now we go and set up. Actually, we can spin up Radarr before I set up the other two systems. So first of all, let's make sure we have our good old Docker service running. It might not be, as was my case. Then we pull up this if it works. Oh, right. Of course, I've declared the Jackett network as external, which means that we'll have to go and spin up Jackett first. Might as well do them all at once. Okay, so Jackett is the same exact concept. Very simple Docker Compose actually. This is the Linux server image. So Jackett is actually this thing, also written in C#. And what it does is, because almost the entirety of all torrent trackers have no API, it essentially creates an API for them. So it allows you to scrape the data off of there for new releases and such. And it has an inbuilt list of all of supported trackers. So, and all I've done is I've used the default port 9117, created a network called Jackett, which is specifically named Jackett because otherwise Docker Compose would probably call it Jackett underscore one or something like that, so that we can use it from the other file. So let's try and bring this one up now. So actually the idea is that you would add multiple trackers to your Jackett instance, and then you can use those from your various services like Sonarr and Radarr and LiDAR and so on to a single Jackett instance. And it will all send the downloads to the single transmission instance. You can also use Qubit Torrent or anything else you like there. And all of these systems, by the way, also have support for Usenet if you are so inclined. So almost done pulling the image. Okay. So that's Jackett up. Let's see, just in case. I've also declared transmission as an external network. We might as well do that one. Bring everything up at once. Transmission, same exact concept as Jackett. Also a Linux server image. Almost almost the entirety. It's the same setup except we must have the data folder I mentioned earlier. The config, you can put that wherever, also name the name container. Oh, sorry, volume. Now the ports are important here because this is the thing that does the downloading. These are the default ones. 1991 is the one to access the web interface. 51413 is actually just the standard one that it uses to connect to other peers. So you're supposed to open this one up in your router, port for it. It can work the same without. It will just have worse performance. Now this is delving into how the BitTorrent protocols works, but if you have no idea how that works, you just leave it at that and it should just do it. And finally, create a network specifically named transmission so everything else can connect. And most importantly, this is the details for the web interface. That's purposely called great password because you should very, very probably be using a .env, an environment file to define the password, not just shoving it in here, but this is just for example. There we go. Actually, let me just check what that port was. 1991. And finally, should be able to bring up Radarr. Now this is pulling specifically the nightly image because that's the one that gives us version B. If you don't specify the tag as nightly, it will pull version 2, which means at some point in the future you'll have to upgrade, and you have the old version which looks ugly. Pulling, okay. And this one is port 7878. This is useful for me to access them on the local host. And as you see, that's the nightly label I was on about there. So now all three are up, which means we should be able to access them using localhost. Oh, not that. So if we go on Radarr at 7878, let's see. Here we are inside Radarr. This is specifically for films. Now, as you will notice on the left-hand side, there is a thing that says issues. That's because we have to set it up to talk to Jackett and transmission. Now let's try to go to Jackett. this is the indexes system, where you would add an indexer by pressing the add indexer button, which we'll do in a moment. And finally, transmission in 1991, for which we chose the passwords as admin and create password. Here it is. This is an extremely simple torrent client that just gets the job done. So effectively speaking, what you want to do is make sure the paths are right. So we bound, let's go back and check. Whoops. We bound the to /data and insert data. So what we want to do is do this as data downloads, because this makes sure that when the download is complete, it tells Radarr that the stuff is in /data that downloads, which, because of the way we bound it, will be the exact same directory that Radarr has access to, and it doesn't try to move it anywhere stupid. The rest are just the usual settings. This is the port that we set up in the Docker Compose file. It's currently closed. If you actually wanted to view the performance, that's the one you'd open. You might want to run this behind a VPN if you're doing anything nefarious, but that's not what we're up to today. Right, Jackett. One thing we want to do if we're running this in a Docker image, it actually suggests that we disable auto update, because you're supposed to update the image itself. You're not supposed to have it update within itself. Also, while you're here, if you like, you can set up an admin password, which will basically, when you load this up, show you a form and you put in your username and password. This is useful if you're exposing it to the World Wide Web for some reason. Right, so let's try adding an index there. When you click on this, it shows you everything. There's a lot that it supports. You most probably want to use a public tracker. For the public ones, don't require any signing up. So let's, for example, add in 13D7X. Why you do that is you just press the plus button. That gets added on here. For your purposes, you might want to have about a dozen in here. A dozen high quality ones. For you don't want low quality results when it searches for something, because then it will be a whole mess and you won't get what you're looking for, and it's a terrible idea. Also, don't be tempted, even though there is an option, to essentially have it such that you add a lot of indexes in Jackett and then you add it once. You add Jackett as a single indexer in Radarr. You don't want to do that. It only reports so many results, and if one goes down, the whole thing shows up as down, and you don't get as good as a system. So now finally onto Radarr. As we see, it tells us the issues. No download client available, so we need to set up transmission. No indexes available, so we need to set up Jackett. So straight into the settings. Go to download clients, and we add a new download client. Now, as we see, it supports Usenet with Torrent, and within Torrent, it supports all of these. So we're going to go for transmission because that's what we set up. Call it transmission. It's going to be localhost on 1991. That's the default one. Because I have not set up HTTPS, we're not going to take use SSL, because it's just running within the same local network, and the way the Docker containers work, that they're exposed on that port, because that's the one we did. If it were conflict with something else, you just change that. Oh, and we need to put in the username and password that we did before, which was admin, great password. And if you're gonna be using Sonarr and any of the other ones, you probably want to add a category here. Just be like Radarr, because that creates a subfolder so it doesn't conflict with the rest of the system. So if we press test, it will try to connect. So actually, it's just told us that it's not able to connect. So let's figure that out a second. It's localhost 1991. Oh,
Is it running in the same? They're not running in the same container though, are they?
no, they're not. But this
So
has worked before for me.
oh,
Oh, do I need to put the
you
name of the
should have to put
container?
in the container's host name or IP.
Right,
There we
yeah,
go.
it's the name of the container. That makes sense, it's Docker. Right, so that's the name of the container and the port. Okay. That's all you need to do for the download client. Next thing is indexes. This you need to pay attention to. So up here, you can add multiple indexes. There's some that are supported by default. What we are going to be using is towards nab, which is effectively speaking what Jackett uses as to communicate. So we added this indexer. So we're gonna name that here, enable these two and get the URL. The URL is done by clicking on copy towards nab feed, putting it in here. So we most likely want to change that to be Jackett because that's the name of the container, and make sure that it's not HTTPS if it's on the local thing because we haven't set that up to work like that. And the API key is right up here. This will be specific to your Jackett instance. Based on it, test it. There it is. So managed to connect. Now, if you wanted to add more indexes, you would add more on here using add indexer, and then you would also have to add them on here separately for each one. So what you can do here is import existing films if you have them somewhere for some reason, or add a new one, and they will show up here. So let's try grabbing a good old friend, Big Book Bunny, which hopefully is available on here. There it is. So this queries the movie DB to grab this information. Now, when you click on it, it will show you this information. It will tell you that the thing is being monitored, which means that if basically if it's monitored, it would look for some download for it. And if you already have a file, it will actually also look for high quality version up to a cutoff point. These are defined by the quality profiles for most use cases. The HD 720p 1080p is the one you're looking for. This means that it will get the highest quality out of 720, 1080 it can find. And if it finds a better one, it upgrades it. So I actually forgot something here. A root folder. We want to set that up the way we've set it up with the other ones. General system. There it is on the settings media management. So we add a root folder. We bound that to /data, I believe. There it is, data. So the root folder is the one where the films will be stored. So it will be data/films. We don't need to tell it that data/downloads exists because we've connected it to transmission and transmission will tell it that it's there. So that's not anything to worry about. So let's try adding that again. As you can see, it will follow the convention, which is to store it in a separate folder within which the files will be stored. And if you tick that box, it will automatically start looking for it. If you go to movies, it will show up in here. The red bar, as it says down here, the red bar means that it's monitored, so we're looking for it, but it's missing, so we haven't found it. And if it were green, it means that we have found it. So if we actually click in this, it will show us the metadata that it's found from the thing. We know that it's by the Banana Foundation, which means that it's royalty free, which is why we're testing it with this. It hasn't found it, so let's try pressing search movie. This will search one indexer. Now, if we go into activity and the queue is empty and the history is empty, it means it didn't actually find it. So the next thing we can try to do is manually import if we have the file somewhere. This allows you to essentially grab the file and put it into the system so it knows where it is. And we may also edit the film. So we decide, okay, I want it to be lower quality and so on. So the fact that this wasn't found means that we're going to have to add a new indexer because that wasn't found. So evidently we don't have a broad enough reach, so to say. Right, let's pick a good one, yeah. Who would have? There's some questionable ones on here. This one, I remember this one being good. So actually, if you click on the settings icon, it will tell you some details about this. Sometimes it says some details such as this won't work unless you set a specific category, because each one has a lot of categories associated with it. This is the kind of stuff you can find on it, right? Now, for a new version of Radarr, you don't actually have to specify that it will pick them up on its own. On Sonarr, it will pick up this list from Jackett, but then you will have to tick the ones that you want, which means on Sonarr you would have to tick the TV ones. And that's just something to keep in mind. Okay, let's try adding this, and if we don't find it on there, then I'll show you something else. Settings, indexes, add, snap. What's that called again? Extra torrent. Whoops. Paste the URL. We want this to actually mean Jackett, and we want the API key. Test. It actually performs a test when you click save anyway, but just in case. Let's try that one more time. If it's done completed, then it doesn't say that it's downloading. It means it didn't find it. But if it had, what would happen is on the activity, it would show up in the queue, and it would tell you how long it takes until it's downloaded, and then over in transmission you would actually see it being downloaded. Unfortunately, that's not being downloaded for us today. However, one thing you might want to do is this box here. Unless you're trying to obliterate your network, or you have a big network and you're feeling generous, you want to stop seeding at some point. This is a ratio of how much you've uploaded compared to how much you've downloaded. So if you do 1, it means you've uploaded the same amount of data as you've downloaded, which is the minimum if we're being nice to people. But if you really can't spare that extra upload, you do something known as free leeching, which means that you limit the upload speed, which means you're almost giving no upload at all to the people. But because if you're using mostly public trackers, they allow you to free leech, which is basically just download it from others without giving back to anyone. Don't do that if you can avoid it, because it defeats the whole purpose of how the BitTorrent protocol works. But that's there if you do need it. But you do want to set it to stop at some point, because otherwise it will just keep seeding forever and it'll probably kill your network at some point. Yes, and I'll just show you a couple of other features in Radarr itself. There is a calendar. This means that if you've added loads of films, and some of them haven't come out yet, but we know when they'll be coming out, it will actually show up in here. And as soon as it's available, Radarr will try to find it and grab it for you and download it. And if you've connected this to your media server, it will show up on there automatically as soon as it's available, which is a very nice system. Then something quite important you might want to mess with is the quality profiles. So these are the profiles we're using. They define essentially based on the resolution. So we have 1080p, 720p, standard definition, and 4K. Within these, there are different categories. So 1080p, these are the release names. So a remux is the actual original file off of disk, just in a different container. It might have a few missing pieces of like extra audio tracks and so on, but it's the actual original file, which means it's the highest quality you will get at that resolution. A Blu-ray is ripped off of a Blu-ray disc, but it's not necessarily the original file. So as in somebody re-encoded in a different codec where lowered the quality a bit. It might be X265 to shrink it a bit. And web is a web rip. This means if something is coming off of a streaming service, this is probably the release you'll find. And HDTV means somebody hooked up like a recording device to a television and just grabbed it off there. The same goes for the rest of these. You can obviously change these. You can reshuffle them. One thing I like doing though is limiting the bitrate of these categories. I would like the highest quality we can get, but I don't have infinite storage, right? So I go over to quality. This is the settings for all of the various quality versions that exist. So we have a lower size limit in bytes per hour, a preferred size, and a maximum limit for each. So the one I'm interested in is the Blu-ray 1080p and the Remux 1080p. Why? Because those are the highest quality 1080p's you can get. They're currently set on unlimited. That's a bad idea unless you have infinite storage for it. It will just grab you like the 90 gigabyte full Blu-ray rip if it comes across it. So bring down the preferred size and the maximum size. Now I have calculated actually that what you should be aiming for here is double of that category of the web rip. So about 12 on the maximum. And you can leave the preferred size whatever. It's the maximum, that's the one that we care about. Why? Because that, if you sort of add that up, it ends up being 10 megabits per second in terms of bitrate, which is quite a good quality for 1080p. And you'd need a very, very good monitor to tell the difference above that. Now, if you're going 4K, it's a completely different matter. Those will take a lot more, but it's the same concept. Don't forget to click Save Changes at the top. And finally, one other useful thing is the customs format. So let's hypothesize we're running this on a Raspberry Pi. or at least we'll be viewing the stuff in Raspberry Pi, which can only do H.264 viewing easily. So what we do is create a condition where we change it so that in the release title, we can put in a regular expression to effectively match X264 things. So I'm not going to come up with that now, but I had found this on the wiki for this system. Somebody has created a regular expression to be able to match. In fact, that's the wiki linked right there. That's just regular expression, never mind. The wiki for Radarr. You can find a lot of profiles for matching different stuff in here, the conditions. They range from anything from like different languages to using the codec, the quality. Now, what are these useful for? They're basically to add preferences or preconditions to the stuff it tries to download. Such as we discussed, H.264 codec for if you want to use it on Raspberry Pi. And the rest is just like extra settings in here. So that's basically all you need to know about this whole setup. Right, so if anyone has any questions, go ahead.
So will it automatically, let's say you change your preferred quality settings and you already have something downloaded, will it look again or?
If you increase the quality, it will up
Okay.
to the cutoff point, which is the highest one in each profile.
Okay.
Top one. Yeah,
And
it will.
it'll just replace the existing file with that.
Exactly.
Okay.
I need an 8K version of Big Buck Bunny.
There is one, but you have to download off of the FTP server.
Yeah, sounds about right.
So does how well does this play with Jellyfin?
Very well. You set up the data/films directory to you bind the same volume with your Jellyfin instance, and you tell it this is my films library. It will show up almost immediately as soon as it's moved there.
Awesome.
And in fact, Jellyfin also shows on your homepage newly added media, which means if you set up the whole system automatically and you tell it to watch, so let's say on Sonarr, a new episode of your favorite TV series comes out, it will be on there as soon as it's available for download, and it will show up here. There's a new thing you can watch.
Does this work well on a Raspberry Pi?
Yes, that's what I use it on. To have the entire stack set up, you might need quite a few gigabytes of RAM for it to run smoothly. So if you have Vader and Sonarr and Jackett and transmission and Jellyfin and so on, then it might need, probably gonna need a 4 gigabyte version.
Would you recommend setting this up with a VPN or not?
That depends on whether you, so if you're acquiring the stuff through torrents and not using it, it depends on whether you would normally be getting any notices from your ISP or not, and what country you're in. Running all of this through a VPN might be unnecessary, but you can do it. In fact, it also becomes a lot easier through Docker containers. Just the transmission container to running through the VPN. For the rest of them, don't need to. In fact, it can cause issues if you run, say, Jackett for VPN, because the APIs they use are rate limited by IP address. And if other people are doing the same thing, it could rate limit you a lot more than it would normally because everyone's using the same IP.